Have you ever noticed how life seems to repeat itself? How the same patterns, the same faces, the same heartbreaks, drift into your reality as if you are caught in a quiet, invisible loop. You wake up one day, and the same mistakes, the same emotional currents, are pulling you along. And you wonder, why do I attract this, again and again? It's as if the universe hands you mirrors, not to reflect your face, but to reflect your inner world, whispering truths you are too busy to hear. You glance at a stranger's eyes across a crowded room, and there's a flicker of recognition, a faint echo of someone you've loved and lost, and you feel that familiar tension rise. That's subtle, not in your chest, that says, "Here we go again." You might blame chance, fate, or even other people, but deep down, you know this pattern is yours to understand. Imagine for a moment that each encounter, each connection, is not random, but a message, a clue left by your own behavior, by the ways you respond, by the beliefs you carry silently, like seeds lying in the soil of your mind, sprouting into relationships that feel eerily similar. And yet, despite this invisible design, despite the familiarity of these cycles, you carry hope. You keep showing up, because part of you knows the pattern is not punishment, but an invitation. An invitation to look closer, to see yourself reflected in others, to question the story you tell yourself about love, about friendship, about who you are and who you attract. And here, at the edge of awareness, a question hovers like a bird poised mid-flight. What if the key to breaking the cycle was not changing others, but understanding yourself first? What if your patterns are less about them, and more about you? You walk through your days surrounded by people, and yet so often you feel alone, not because of a lack of connection, but because of how rarely anyone truly sees. At a party, laughter fills the room like music. Glasses clink, and everyone is performing a version of themselves that feels safe, polished, approved. You smile, you nod, you laugh too, but under it all, there's a quiet sense that nothing is as it seems. Everyone wears masks, friends, lovers, colleagues, and perhaps you do too, unconsciously. At work, the same drama unfolds. Meetings, small talks by the coffee machine, endless emails, each interaction meticulously rehearsed, driven not by honesty, but by habit, obligation, or fear. You think people are being themselves, but most are not. They are shadows moving through routines, trying to be liked, trying to avoid conflict, trying to fit in. And you, sensing this, may feel slightly detached, slightly apart, as if watching a movie in which everyone else forgot they are actors. At home, the pattern continues. Family dinners, casual greetings. The same unresolved arguments circling like restless spirits. The words exchanged are familiar, predictable, comforting perhaps, but also hollow, like echoes of something you already knew. Life, it seems, is an intricate dance of appearances, a complex illusion we participate in without noticing. And yet, in this illusion, your patterns are quietly forming. The people you attract, the conflicts you endure, the relationships that repeat, they are all drawn to the frequency you emit. Not in some mystical sense, but in the way you respond, the way you perceive. The habits your mind and heart have rehearsed for years. You may think you are observing the world, but perhaps the world is observing you. Reflecting back your unspoken beliefs, your unresolved desires, your silent fears, and when you pause for a moment, when you notice the subtle currents beneath laughter and conversation, beneath the routine of everyday life, you begin to see the hidden thread weaving your experiences together. It is subtle, almost imperceptible, yet undeniable. The same types of people, the same dynamics, the same emotional outcomes. They appear not because you are unlucky, but because you are unconscious of the patterns you are living and repeating. And so, the question emerges quietly, like a shadow in the corner of your mind. What would it mean to wake up, to step out of this illusion? To see not just the world around you, but the currents inside you that draw these experiences close. And then, almost imperceptibly, it happens. You notice a shift. A moment arrives when the fog lifts, if only slightly, and you see beneath the surface of your life. Perhaps it comes in a quiet conversation, a fleeting glance, a phrase that resonates more deeply than you expect. Suddenly, The patterns that once felt invisible are laid bare. The people who repeat in your life, the conflicts that return like tides, the old heartbreaks, they are not random. They are mirrors, reflections of your own unseen habits. Your unconscious choices, the silent scripts your mind has been playing for years. In this moment, the awakening feels electric, almost frightening. There is beauty in it, yes, but also a subtle tension, like standing at the edge of a cliff. Peering into an abyss that is at once familiar and unknown, you realize how often you have been asleep. How often you have allowed life to sweep over you without noticing the undercurrents that shape it. And yet, with this clarity comes responsibility, the weight of understanding that your actions, your words, your attention, even your desires, all contribute to the world you attract. It is liberating, and it is dangerous, because seeing the truth is not always comforting. You cannot unsee what has been revealed. The ordinary interactions, the habitual responses, the choices you once thought trivial, they carry meaning, consequences, echoes that return to you in the lives of others. And still, there is hope, a quiet light that beckons. This awareness is not punishment. It is awakening. It is the first step toward change, toward breaking the loops that have held you captive. You feel it deep in your chest. A stirring of possibility, a whisper that says, you can choose differently, you can act consciously, you can transform the way you relate to the world and the people who come into your life. And yet, as the mind races, as the heart swells with both fear and excitement, a subtle question lingers, almost like a shadow at the edge of your perception. If this awareness separates you from the comfort of the familiar, from the repetition you once knew, from the patterns that lulled you into ease, can you endure the solitude it brings? Can you hold the clarity without losing yourself to the isolation it may demand? With awareness comes a peculiar loneliness, a sense of being untethered from the currents that once carried you. You start to notice how conversations feel shallower, how laughter sometimes echoes in a hollow room, how people continue to dance in their habitual patterns while you stand quietly at the edge, watching. There is a subtle ache in realizing that many cannot or will not see what you now perceive. You remember a friend, someone you once confided in, who laughed off your observations, who turned away when you spoke of feelings or truths that could not be simplified. And in that laughter, in that gentle dismissal, there is a quiet confirmation. Your awakening separates you, not because you are better or worse, but because you are awake while the world remains asleep. You begin to understand that true awareness carries weight. You feel the distance in family gatherings, the unspoken misalignments with colleagues, the subtle disconnect with lovers who only wish to repeat the familiar scripts. It is not resentment you feel, but a delicate, bittersweet clarity. You start to see people as they are, flawed, habitual, unconscious, and this vision, though illuminating, can be heavy to carry. You might try to explain it, to reach out, to connect, but words often fail. The story you see in yourself and others is complex, layered, nuanced, and most cannot comprehend the depth you now inhabit. And so, isolation settles, like a quiet companion, present but not unkind. You may walk through crowded streets, passing faces you've known all your life, yet feel the subtle gap that separates you from the ordinary flow of existence. And in that gap, you discover both danger and liberation. The danger is emotional exhaustion, the loneliness that presses against the chest, the subtle temptation to retreat into patterns that once comforted you, but no longer satisfy. The liberation is clarity, the profound. And now, standing at the edge of awareness, you feel the stirrings of conflict. Not in the world around you, but deep within yourself. You see what others overlook, sense the patterns they repeat, and feel the urge to speak, to intervene, to offer guidance or correction. But every impulse is shadowed by hesitation, by the knowledge that action may disrupt, alienate, or even backfire. You know the truth, and yet you wonder, is it your role to disturb the illusion, or to observe quietly, letting others live their cycles while you silently learn from them? The tension gnaws at you. Every choice becomes weighted. Every word carries consequence. Every silence feels loaded. Perhaps you witness a friend repeating a destructive pattern, or a colleague sabotaging themselves in subtle ways. or a lover drawn to familiar pain. Your heart urges you forward, your mind warns caution, and your instincts tremble between courage and restraint. You recognize that intervention could be a lifeline, a chance to break the loops that ensnare them, but it could also shatter comfort, provoke resistance, or even sever bonds. And so, the conflict is not external, but internal, a battlefield where love, empathy, fear, and reason collide. You may try to act from compassion, only to be met with misunderstanding. You may remain silent, only to feel the guilt of inaction pressing against your chest. Every decision seems to carry both light and shadow, both clarity and risk. And as this struggle unfolds, you realize that your awareness, once a quiet gift, now demands responsibility. The patterns you have seen are no longer abstract, they are living, breathing realities that intersect with your choices in ways both subtle and profound. And you begin to understand a delicate truth. Sometimes the greatest act of wisdom is not in correcting others, but in holding your own space, in observing without losing yourself, in engaging without absorbing the chaos. And yet, even this restraint carries its own tension. A subtle ache that whispers, how do you love? How do you act? How do you navigate a world that refuses to awaken as you have? The answer is not simple. It is a test of patience, of courage, of discernment, and in the quiet of this inner turmoil, a new stage of your journey waits. Darker yet necessary. The point at which overawareness and emotional absorption begin to take their toll. When the weight of clarity presses heavily on your mind and heart, and then, slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the weight of awareness begins to press against you, a silent, relentless force. You notice the exhaustion that seeps into your bones, the quiet tremor in your mind as every thought becomes amplified, every feeling magnified. The world, once familiar, now feels raw and unyielding. Each interaction, a prism refracting infinite layers of meaning, each word carrying subtle echoes of truth and falsehood. You try to navigate it, to remain steady, but the constant clarity becomes a strain. Like carrying a lantern in the dark, only to realize the flame is fragile, and your arms are weary. Memories, patterns, human contradictions, they swirl together into a tempest inside you, leaving you dizzy with insight, yet hollow with fatigue. You begin to feel the toll of knowing too much, of sensing too deeply. Your heart aches with empathy, your mind is cluttered with possibilities, and the quiet moments once cherished now feel like a vacuum where every truth you have uncovered clamors for attention. Sleep offers little refuge. Dreams are invaded by reflections, by fragments of conversations and unspoken fears. You start to question everything: your choices, your attachments, your very capacity to endure this clarity. The irony is cruel. The awakening that once felt liberating now threatens to overwhelm. The very consciousness that promised freedom now feels like chains. And yet, there is beauty even in collapse, if you dare to look closely. It is here, in this crucible of exhaustion, that the raw edges of your being are revealed. Like a sculptor chiseling stone, the strain carves awareness into precision, forcing you to confront not just the world, but the self that has been hidden beneath routines, habits, and illusions. You see your own shadows, your compulsions, your fears, your attachments reflected in the patterns you have long noticed in others. And in this recognition, there is both despair and a strange, subtle relief. For the collapse is not an end, but a necessary reckoning, a purification of perception. The mind trembles, the heart wearies, and yet a quiet voice whispers beneath the storm. There is a way through this. There is a path to balance, to engagement without absorption, to love without losing yourself, to seeing without being broken by what you see. And as you stand at the edge of this inner tumult, a subtle anticipation stirs, a gentle hope that after collapse comes revelation, after the pressure comes clarity, and after the storm comes a calm you never imagined possible. And then, slowly, as the storm within you settles into a rhythm, you begin to notice something extraordinary. Clarity does not have to be heavy. Awareness does not have to crush. There is a way to move through the world with open eyes and a calm heart, to see the patterns, the repetitions, the hidden truths, and still remain gentle with yourself. You realize that the cycles you once believed trapped you are invitations, opportunities to engage consciously, to choose differently, to respond instead of react. The people you attract, the relationships that repeat, the situations that once felt inevitably, all of them are not punishments, but mirrors, teaching you not to control the world, but to understand the world you carry within. You learn, gradually, that boundaries are not walls, but a form of respect for yourself, for your energy, for your capacity to love without losing yourself. Acceptance becomes a tool, not resignation. You can witness the flaws, the habits, the repetitions, without becoming entangled in them. Compassion arises naturally, both for others and for yourself, because you recognize that everyone is navigating patterns, often unconscious, often unaware, just as you once did. You begin to understand the quiet power of letting go of the compulsion to fix, to force change, to rescue, to overextend. You see that love, attention, connection, they are most potent when given freely, without expectation, without attempting to repair what is not yours to repair. In this revelation, hope blooms gently, like sunlight after rain. You notice that your relationships transform not because the world around you has changed, but because your presence has shifted. You are no longer drawn into repetition blindly. You choose where to engage, when to speak, how to hold space, how to step back. And with each conscious choice, you experience freedom, the kind that comes not from escaping patterns, but from understanding them, mastering your response, and aligning with your own inner truth. It is a quiet revolution, invisible to others, yet seismic within you. You remember the isolation, the collapse, the tension, and you see them now as necessary passages, refining your awareness, tempering your heart, shaping your capacity to navigate life with both depth and grace. And as you embrace this wisdom, a subtle, profound sense of peace arises. You understand that life is not about controlling others or avoiding patterns, but about engaging with consciousness, awareness, and intention. You stand in this revelation, ready to integrate it fully, carrying insight like a lantern, illuminating your path, offering light where it is wanted, and warmth where it is safe to share. And as you look forward, the final question gently emerges. How do you take all that you have seen, all that you have learned, and live it fully, harmoniously, gracefully in the world that continues its endless dance? And now, with revelation in your heart and clarity in your mind, you step into integration. The patterns that once felt like chains are now threads you can weave consciously into the tapestry of your life. You carry awareness without being burdened by it, you see without being overwhelmed, and you move through relationships with both presence and ease. The people you attract are no longer dictated by unconscious repetition, but by the resonance of your own inner state, the energy you cultivate, the boundaries you honor, the love you give freely, yet wisely. You notice how moments that once triggered tension now pass with gentle understanding, how conversations flow with authenticity, how connections deepen when you engage consciously rather than react compulsively. The world remains imperfect, as it always has been, yet it no longer shakes you in the same way. You have learned that the loops, the patterns, the repetitions, they were never meant to trap you, but to teach you, to guide you, to call you inward. And in answering that call, you discover a profound freedom. The freedom to choose. The freedom to respond with awareness. The freedom to love without losing yourself. You see the same paradox that began this journey. The people you attract are mirrors, and yet they are not your destiny, they are your reflection, offering lessons, insights, and invitations to grow. You smile at the realization that the world outside is always in motion, yet the world within can be steady, luminous, alive. You carry this integration quietly, like a gentle flame, illuminating your path and softening your presence in the world. And as you pause to reflect on the journey, the awakening, the isolation, the conflict, the collapse, the revelation, you recognize that life is not about escaping patterns, but about participating consciously, gracefully, courageously. You understand that every encounter, every relationship, Every repeated moment is an opportunity to practice presence, wisdom, and compassion, first with yourself, then with others. And so, you move forward, not with expectation, but with understanding. Not with fear, but with clarity. Not with the compulsion to control, but with the freedom to engage fully, intentionally, and beautifully. And now, at the end of this reflection, you return to the question that began it all. Why do you keep attracting the same kind of person? Perhaps it was never about them, but always about you, your patterns, your awareness, your choices. And now, with the mirror held gently in your hands, you are free to see, to learn, and to live differently, fully, and consciously.